didn't take long after that for my plan to start to come together perfectly. My mother was of course fine with it, and after a bit of talking to Alice's parents as well, decided that it would be a good idea. Of course, simply telling them that this summer camp of sorts was merely an opportunity to spend time with other young people, enjoying physical activities, and learning in a less domestic setting, all with strict supervision that wouldn't actually be there. But with my mother backing the story, it was simple enough. After taking a trip to see Eliza's family, which was a little more off the beaten path than going to Alice's, my mother managed to convince Eliza's parents to allow her to come as well. Of course, we had to convince them that it was a special class for engineering. We couldn't tell Eliza at that point in time, but after hearing that it was about engineering, she was all for it, of course. And in no time at all, both Eliza and Alice had packed up their bags and begun to bring them over to my estate. After everybody was unpacked, we had a private chat, me, Alice, and Eliza, in my room. Despite the thought that I might have thought Eliza might be a little more suspicious, after learning that magic was real, she was all on board and couldn't wait to find out more about it. And after telling her that magic actually had a great deal in common with engineering or chemistry, she nearly lost her mind. She simply had to. She had to know. And when I revealed the magical index, it was game over. Eliza was obsessed. Of course, there was still the problem that Eliza didn't have as much experience or knowledge in magic as myself or Alice, meaning that I would have to give her time with the magical index to learn what she needed. Alice actually said that this was beneficial. She said that my amount of knowledge up to this point was sufficient for me to start practicing magic. In fact, she was quite insistent on it, that I needed to start learning a few spells, and agreed to be my magical instructor for the time being. So my mother instructed most of the staff, including those who worked outside, to stay clear of a certain area, giving myself, Eliza, and Alice a wide berth in which we could start to practice magic. To be honest, I still wanted to read through the magical index more myself. I was just starting to get to some very interesting information. For example, I've started to find out that there was more to magic than just the three initial categories of casters. This was merely a baseline, something that distinguished casters by the ease at which they were able to cast spells. But after that, it got even more complex, separating people who could cast magic into defined groups and multiple different specialities. It appeared as if almost everybody had their own sort of magical essence to them. No two people were identical, and as such, magic differed between individuals. One's physical body and even their personality had its own effect, as well as emotional status. All of these things affected the magical energy that a person produced, meaning there would be certain types of magic that they were better at than others. For example, some people may favor magic that is more about creating magical artifacts than casting spells, having an enhanced ability to imbue magic on non-magical things in order to create magical items. Other people's energy might favor enhancing things. For example, taking a stick and imbuing it with their magical energy, so suddenly that stick is a battering ram, like a sledgehammer able to smash through just about anything. There were those able to enhance their physical form, those more keen to summon magical energies for destruction, such as casting lightning or pure bolts of magical energy. There were countless different categories and specializations that a wizard could fall into after learning magic. In fact, this was usually the category which took much more time to decide than the initial one, taking time for a caster to find his place, so to speak, the things that they were best at as an individual. One could have still, of course, learned spells from all other categories, but knowing what your strong suits are can always work to your advantage and give you a natural edge in that category, so long as you know what it is, of course. "Reginald," Alice shouted, breaking my concentration, as I was rather lost in thought. We had taken up residence in a quiet section of the woods outside of my main property, somewhere far away from prying eyes, so that even if my mother had told the staff to stay clear, they wouldn't by chance come across us. And there Alice was, staring daggers at me. "Focus, Reginald. This is very important. You need to learn these things," Alice said, kneeling down, looking at me as I sat on a fallen tree. Alice was in the midst of teaching me practical magic. She decided that the first thing I needed to learn was a defensive spell. "Now, Reginald," Alice announced, "this is one of the most important factors in deciding combat between magical casters. You need to know defensive magic, at least the basics for now. I can't have you dying before we reach our destiny, so I'm going to teach you a very basic defensive magic spell. This spell is simply known as Sanctum, and announced the same. Sanctum allows you to create a magical field or barrier. It won't encompass everything, but it's large enough to deflect small amounts of magical force. For now, you'll probably have to use the incantation to summon it, but as you get used to it, you'll most likely be able to use it without the incantation. It is a very base spell. Sanctum works by relying on your own physical and spiritual energies, siphoning off small amounts of those, and projecting them forward as a barrier. Of course, there are always limitations. Mainly, your own magical ability is the primary limitation that you'll face with this spell, meaning the barrier that you're capable of producing is a reflection of your own magical status. The stronger your magical ability, the stronger the barrier you can produce. This too is another key reason that this is a good spell to start with when it comes to training you in practical magic, because it draws from your own individual energy rather than an outside source. We can begin to strengthen your magical ability. If you haven't found this much out thus far in the magical index, one's magical ability can improve over time. Basically, the more you draw at the energies you produce, the more demand you create. This, in essence, causes your body to go through what you might call development. Because you're increasing the demand on those energies, your body will begin to create more of them, strengthening those energy sources. Sanctum gathers a small amount of energy from most of your systems. Almost all of the energy that you produce gives a small portion to the spell, so it's nice and rounded when it comes to the amount of things that it develops. In a basic sense, it's a lot like staying physically fit. By exercising, you exercise your muscles, and those muscles get stronger and more developed. It's basically the same for magic. You have to flex your magic muscles, Alice said, smiling. Now, as for the function of the spell, Reginald, you should announce the words Sanctum. When you do, try to visualize a force, a separating energy between you and me. The visualization is a key aspect. Most people's sanctums take different forms depending on the caster. What you need to do is visualize some sort of separating barrier, something that will stop a person from getting to you. It could be anything: a wall, a shield, a doorway. Simply picture whatever barrier you want and then project it using the incantation. Once you are able to start projecting your incantation, we can start developing your magic, Alice said, smiling, putting her hands behind her back. So, what are you waiting for? Get on your feet and give it a try. I took a deep breath. This was going to be my first attempt at practical magic. I needed to get this right. Focus. I stood to my feet with a serious expression on my face. Took a stance. I extended my hand forward. I focused on the image of a shield and announced the words aloud, Sanctum, and nothing happened. I stood there for a moment, wondering why nothing happened. Alice looked at me puzzled for a moment. Well, why aren't you using your trigger? Alice announced. Trigger? What trigger? I thought to myself.